The sky was on fire. Towering plumes of smoke rose from what used to be the heart of civilization. The Xelzoran Armada had arrived with no warning, and no mercy. Their ships, dark and jagged, blotted out the sun, unleashing energy blasts that tore through entire city blocks. Within hours, Earth's defenses lay in ruins. The planetary shield shattered, the orbital stations reduced to drifting wreckage. The last transmissions from High Command were desperate calls for evacuation, but there was nowhere left to run. Major Jackson Cole stood on the shattered remains of a freeway overlooking what was left of Denver. The once thriving metropolis was now a graveyard, entire districts reduced to molten craters, the air thick with the acrid stench of burning metal and flesh. Behind him, a handful of survivors watched in silent horror. Some were soldiers, others civilians. None had ever imagined this day would come. The Xelzoran were relentless. Their towering war machines marched through the ruins, crushing everything in their path. Their foot soldiers, grotesque creatures clad in spiked armor, moved with precision, hunting down the last remnants of resistance. Overhead fighter craft screamed through the air, unleashing strafing runs on anything that moved. Humanity was being erased. Cole clenched his fists, his body bruised, his uniform torn, but his mind was still sharp. He had been a soldier long enough to know when a battle was lost. But this was more than just a battle. This was extermination. And if humanity was going to survive, they had to fight differently. A static-filled transmission crackled through his earpiece, the voice barely audible over the interference. "This is Lieutenant Reeves, Resistance Cell Echo 17, reporting heavy losses. Seeking survivors." Cole pressed a hand to his earpiece. "This is Major Cole. Where are you?" "Pinned down, East Sector Warehouse District. We have weapons, but we need an exit." Cole glanced at the ruins below. If they could regroup, they had a chance to push back, however small. Without hesitation, he turned to his team, 10 fighters, barely armed, exhausted but determined. "We move now. No one gets left behind." His voice was calm but firm. They moved through the broken streets, avoiding patrols, sticking to the shadows. Every step was a risk. The Xelzoran patrolled in groups, their alien hounds sniffing out the wounded. A single mistake would mean death. They reached the warehouse district after what felt like an eternity. The remains of Echo 17 were barricaded inside an old freight yard, pinned by enemy drones. Cole signaled his team, and they spread out using debris as cover. "On my mark." 3, 2, 1. Gunfire erupted. Human weapons may have been weaker, but they still punched holes in flesh, and armor. Explosions ripped through the yard as makeshift grenades detonated. The Xelzoran, caught off guard, fell in waves. The moment the last enemy dropped, Cole moved in, checking the survivors. Reeves was wounded but alive. She nodded to him with a mix of relief and exhaustion. "Glad you showed up. We weren't going to last much longer." Cole helped her to her feet. "We aren't done yet. Earth has fallen, but we haven't. We regroup, we rebuild, and we fight, because this war is far from over." The night was thick with smoke, the ruins of the city stretching in every direction. Cole led the group through the wreckage, keeping low, keeping quiet. The Xelzoran had doubled their patrols. After the warehouse ambush, their war machines stalked the streets, scanning for any sign of human resistance. One wrong move, and they would be erased just like the others. They moved through underground tunnels, remnants of an old subway system. The air was stale, heavy with dust. Every so often, they heard the distant hum of enemy drones. Searching, always searching. Cole didn't know how long they had been moving, but he knew they needed a real plan. Hiding was not survival, it was only delaying the inevitable. Reeves limped beside him, her face pale from blood loss. She refused to slow down, her grip on her rifle steady. "We can't keep running forever, Cole. We need a place to regroup, a real stronghold." Cole nodded, already thinking ahead. There was one place that might still exist. Project Redoubt was a myth, a last resort bunker built long before the war, a place where Earth's leaders could retreat if the worst ever happened. But it had never been used. No one knew exactly where. It was just rumors and classified files Cole had read years ago. If it was real, if it still existed, it could be the key to fighting back. They traveled for hours, moving through the tunnels until they reached the rocky foothills outside the city. The stars above were barely visible through the smoke, but here at least they were away from the worst of the destruction. Cole led them through the wilderness, until they found what they were looking for, a sheer cliff face, covered in vines and rubble. It looked unremarkable, but Cole knew better. He brushed away the dirt, revealing the edge of a reinforced steel door, half buried beneath the debris of a landslide. He turned to the group, weapons ready. We don't know what's inside. Could be empty, could be worse. Either way, this is our best shot. They worked quickly, clearing the entrance. Finally, Cole found the control panel, ancient, rusted, barely functional. He pressed his palm to the scanner for a long moment. Nothing happened. Then, with a deep mechanical groan, the door began to open. Inside, the air was cold, untouched by time. Emergency lights flickered to life, casting long shadows down the steel corridors. The bunker was massive. Rows of storage crates lined the walls, weapon racks, computers, generators, all waiting to be used. Reeves let out a low whistle. Guessed the old stories were true. Cole stepped forward, brushing dust off an old terminal. His fingers flew over the keyboard. Power systems coming online, data logs booting up. This was more than a shelter. It was a war machine waiting to be awakened. They spent hours exploring the deeper levels, finding hidden caches of prototype weapons, armor, drones, technology that had never been deployed before, because humanity had always thought they had time, but time had run out. And now everything in this place would be used. As the others gathered supplies, Cole stared at a massive holographic map of Earth. Cells are in positions, marked across every continent. They thought they had won. They thought humanity was finished. But they had no idea what was coming. The bunker had become more than a hiding place. It was a forge where something new was being created. Soldiers, engineers, even civilians who had never fired a weapon before were learning, adapting, changing. Cole stood at the center of it all, watching as the remnants of humanity hardened into something that Selzarin had never expected, a force that would not break, a fire that would not go out. Reeves stood beside him, her wounds still healing, but her spirit stronger than ever. This place has everything: weapons, drones, armor, even stealth tech. She shook her head, almost laughing. They locked all this away and never used it. Cole stared at the rows of untouched weapons. Military leaders always plan for the next war, but they never expect the one that actually comes. Well, we are going to put it all to use. The first attack was simple, a supply raid. The Selzarin had set up a staging ground at an old airfield, using it as a refueling station for their patrols. It was lightly guarded. They thought humanity was broken, that there was no need to waste real forces on a world already conquered. Cole was about to teach them how wrong they were. They moved under the cover of darkness, wearing scavenged enemy armor modified with human tech. Their weapons silenced, their movements precise. The Selzarin were methodical, but they lacked imagination. They had rules, orders, protocols. Humanity had something else: instinct, adaptability, a will to survive. The first guards never saw it coming. Knives in the dark, silenced shots, bodies dragged out of sight. The resistance slipped into the base like shadows, planting explosives, setting up ambush points. Cole crouched behind a stack of fuel drums, watching the enemy move. There were only 20 of them against over 100, but they had the element of surprise and the will to win. On his signal, the night exploded. The first blasts tore through the refueling stations, sending fireballs into the sky. Gunfire erupted from all sides. Confusion spread through the enemy ranks. They had never faced an attack like this before. Their formations broke, their discipline shattered as they scrambled for cover that did not exist. Reeves and her team took the control tower, gunning down the officers before they could call for reinforcements. Cole led the charge through the main hangar, taking down anything that moved, his rifle glowing hot in his hands. They had trained for this, studied the enemy, knew their weaknesses: hit hard, hit fast, never stop moving. Within minutes it was over. The base was in flames, Selzarin bodies littering the ground. The survivors fled, abandoning their supplies, their vehicles, their weapons. Cole stood in the wreckage, his breathing heavy, his hands clenched into fists. This was just the beginning. By morning, the news had spread across the occupied territories. A Selzarin base wiped out by human hands, a victory against an enemy that thought itself invincible. Resistance cells hidden across Earth and beyond heard the message loud and clear: humanity was not done. Humanity was fighting back. The war was no longer about survival. It was about taking back everything. The Selzarin were no longer ignoring the resistance. The attack on the airfield had shaken them. The remains of their outpost were still burning when their war machines arrived, towering walkers scanning the ruins, drones circling like vultures searching for the ones who had done this. But Cole and his people were already gone, moving through hidden tunnels, vanishing like ghosts. Back at the bunker, they analyzed enemy movements. The Xel'Zaran were responding faster, adapting, but they were still predictable. They relied on overwhelming force, on crushing anything in their way. What they did not understand was that humans were not something that could be crushed. They bent, but they did not break, and now they were hitting harder than ever. Reeves spread out a map across the table, pointing to a key supply route. The enemy was moving fuel and ammunition through a valley north of their position, heavily guarded but not impossible to hit. Cole studied the data. If they could take out that convoy, the enemy would feel it for weeks. He looked at the faces around him, hardened fighters, people who had lost everything and still refused to give up. We take it, we hit them where it hurts. No mistakes, no second chances. They moved out before dawn, camouflaged by the shadows, moving along ridgelines, staying low. They reached the valley and took positions, watching as the convoy rolled through armored transports flanked by walker escorts, a massive hover tank at the center, a fortress on treads. The Xel'Zaran were adapting, but they still underestimated just how far humans would go to win. Cole signaled the attack. The first explosion rocked the valley, sending debris into the air. The lead transport flipped, landing in flames. Resistance snipers took out the escorts. Before they could react, Reeves led a charge from the cliffs, tossing grenades into the chaos. The Xel'Zaran scrambled to respond, their formation collapsing under the sudden ambush. Then the tank fired a single blast, vaporized an entire section of the ridge, forcing the resistance to scatter. Cole barely had time to shout orders before another blast shook the ground. They had prepared for this, but not for something of this scale. If they did not disable that tank, they were all dead. Moving through the wreckage, Cole sprinted toward the machine, keeping low, dodging gunfire. He could hear Reeves shouting over the comms, trying to draw its attention away as he climbed onto the side of the hull. Heat radiated from its armor, the turret slowly turning, scanning for targets. But Cole had already reached the hatch. He planted a charge, pressed against the metal, and jumped off as the explosion ripped through the top. Fire burst from inside the tank. The machine groaned, its systems failing. The turret spun wildly before locking up. The remaining Xel'Zaran, panicked, leaderless, broken, without command structure. Their discipline collapsed. The resistance cut through them, taking everything, leaving nothing. When the battle was over, the valley was silent. The convoy, destroyed, the supplies taken. The bunker now had enough firepower to take on larger targets. As Cole stood in the aftermath, he knew one thing for certain: the Xel'Zaran thought they could break humanity, but the only thing breaking was them. The victory in the valley had sent shockwaves through the Xel'Zaran command. Their convoys were no longer safe. Their supply lines were bleeding, but victories always came at a cost. Cole knew that too well. They had forced the enemy to take them seriously, and that meant the response would be brutal. Scouts reported increased Xel'Zaran activity across the region, more patrols, more drones, more raids. They were searching for the resistance, and they would not stop until they found them. Cole and Reeves sat in the bunker's command room, watching the enemy movements unfold on a holographic display. "We need to move," Reeves said. "They're closing in." Cole shook his head. "We move now, we lose everything we have built. We hold our ground, we fight smart." But the enemy was already one step ahead. The attack came just before dawn. The bunker's early warning systems detected movement too late. Explosions rocked the underground corridors. The main entrance caved in. Alarms blared as resistance fighters scrambled to their positions. The Xel'Zaran were here, and they knew exactly where to strike. Cole grabbed his rifle, moving through the smoke, orders barking through his earpiece: "Hold the lower levels, fall back to defensive positions." The enemy was inside, moving fast, cutting down fighters in the halls. "How did they find us? How did they know?" Reeves' voice cut through the chaos. "We have a traitor." The words hit harder than the explosions. Someone had sold them out. Someone had given the enemy their location, their defenses, their weaknesses. Cole felt the rage burning in his chest, but there was no time to think, only time to fight. He and Reeves pushed through the corridors, cutting down enemy soldiers, leading the counterattack step by step. They pushed the Xel'Zaran back, forcing them into choke points, ambushing them from hidden passageways. The bunker had been built for war, and they were turning it into a killing ground. But the losses were heavy, too many dead, too many wounded, and the battle was not over yet. The Xel'Zaran commander, a towering figure in black armor, pushed forward, leading his elite guard. He moved with terrifying precision, his energy blade cutting through human defenses. Like paper, his forces unstoppable, until Cole stepped into his path. The two warriors faced each other in the burning wreckage of the command center. No words were spoken, none were needed. The fight was brutal, fast, precise. The Xel'Zaran was stronger, faster, but Cole was human. He was desperate, he was relentless. He dodged, he countered, he fought with everything he had until finally, with one last strike, he drove his knife into the enemy's throat. The Xel'Zaran commander fell, his forces hesitated, and that was all the resistance needed. Reeves and the others surged forward, driving the remaining invaders out of the bunker, forcing them to retreat, leaving behind only smoke and bodies. When it was over, Cole stood among the wreckage, breathing heavily. They had won, but the cost had been too high, and the betrayal still lingered like a shadow in the air. Someone among them had done this, and Cole would not stop until he found out who. The bunker was silent now, except for the hum of backup generators and the distant echoes of the wounded being treated. Victory felt hollow. Bodies of fallen resistance fighters were being carried away, each one a reminder that they had been betrayed. Cole stood in the ruined command center, staring at the holographic map still flickering with static. Someone had given their location to the Xel'Zaran, someone among them. Reeves stepped up beside him. Her face was bruised, her rifle slung over her shoulder. "We have a problem," she said. "No sign of force transmissions, no intercepted signals. The only way they could have found us is if someone told them directly." Cole nodded grimly. "That means we have a traitor, and they're still here." There was no time to mourn, no time to hesitate. They had lost too much already. Cole gathered the remaining fighters into the central chamber, his voice steady but sharp. "We were hit hard because someone among us gave our location to the enemy. We find out who, or more people will die." The group shifted uneasily, faces tense, eyes darting around, some filled with fear, others with suspicion. No one wanted to believe it, but the truth was undeniable. Reeves ran a quick scan through bunker records, looking for anything out of place. Logs showed no outgoing messages, no unusual activity. But then she found something. One of the storage rooms had been accessed during the attack. Supplies were missing, but nothing had been reported. Cole clenched his jaw. Whoever did this was still covering their tracks. He and Reeves moved quickly, checking the storage rooms, their weapons ready. Behind one of the shelves, a hidden panel had been forced open, revealing a tunnel leading away from the bunker. Fresh footprints in the dust. Cole signaled his team, "We move now, weapons hot, no one gets away." They followed the tunnel through the darkness, moving fast, tracking the footprints deeper underground. The air was thick, damp. The tunnel old, likely part of a forgotten escape route, but now it had been used for something else. Betrayal. After nearly an hour, they found him, Corporal Darren Voss, one of their own, standing at a makeshift transmitter, his hands moving across the controls, sending out another signal. Cole raised his rifle, voice cold. "Step away from the terminal." Voss turned, his face pale, his hands trembling. He looked more afraid than defiant. "They forced me," he whispered. "The Xel'Zaran. They had my family." Cole's hands tightened around his weapon. "You still sold us out. You got good people killed." Voss took a step back, shaking his head. "You don't understand. They're bringing something worse, something we can't fight. If I didn't do this, we would all be dead." Cole exchanged a glance with Reeves, her jaw clenched, her trigger finger twitching. Then the transmitter beeped. A response was coming through. Cole grabbed Voss by the collar, slamming him against the wall. "What did you do? What are they sending?" Voss gasped, eyes wide with terror. "It's not a fleet, it's something else, something bigger, something that ends wars." The message was coming in now, and Cole knew whatever it was, humanity was about to face its greatest threat yet. The message scrolled across the terminal, alien symbols glowing red against the darkness. Reeves worked fast, translating, her face growing paler with every word. Cole stood over Voss, his grip still tight on the traitor's collar. "Tell me what they're bringing." Voss swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. "The Doom engine." Cole's blood ran cold. He had heard rumors, whispers of a weapon so powerful that no resistance, no army, no civilization could stand against it. A planetary eraser, something that turned worlds into dust. He let go of Voss, pushing him toward Reeves. "Lock him down. We don't have time for anything else." Reeves shoved Voss into cuffs, While Cole turned back to the transmission, the message was still running coordinates, a countdown they had hours before it arrived. They ran back through the tunnel, bursting into the main bunker. Every surviving Resistance member turned as Cole's voice cut through the tense silence. "The Xel'Zeren are done playing games. They're bringing a world killer, and we have one chance to stop it." No one flinched, no one backed away. They had come too far, lost too much to run now. Reeves pulled up satellite feeds. A massive object was moving toward Earth. Not a ship, something larger, something ancient. The Doom engine. It looked like a fortress in space. A machine the size of a city, covered in spires and weapon ports. Glowing cracks ran along its surface, like veins of molten fire. It was alive in a way, but its only purpose was death. Cole's mind raced. There had to be a way to stop it, but conventional weapons would never work. Even their stolen Xel'Zeren tech was useless against something this massive. Then his eyes locked onto something on the holo display, an old orbital defense platform, abandoned before the invasion. It still had one operational rail cannon designed for asteroid defense. Reeves followed his gaze, her eyes widening. "You want to hit that thing with a rail slug at suborbital speeds?" Cole nodded. "It's the only thing we have that can punch through." The problem was the station was deep in enemy territory, crawling with Xel'Zeren forces. They had to get in, fire the shot, and get out before the Doom engine wiped them from existence. Suicide. Maybe, but better than waiting to be erased. Cole looked at the faces around him, people who had fought bold and sacrificed for every inch of ground they had taken back. They knew the stakes, they knew what had to be done. They moved fast, splitting into strike teams. The main force would create diversions across the region, drawing enemy attention, while Cole, Reeves, and a handful of the best fighters infiltrated the station. Every second counted. As the countdown ticked lower, the Doom engine approaching, its massive silhouette growing against the stars. As their stolen Xel'Zeren dropship lifted off, Cole took one last look at Earth, at everything they were fighting for. They had beaten the odds before, they had survived the impossible, and now they were about to face death itself, and win. The stolen Xel'Zeren dropship cut through the void, moving fast under enemy sensors. Cole gripped his rifle, eyes locked on the massive structure ahead, the abandoned orbital defense platform, floating in the darkness, its rail cannon silent for years, its systems likely in decay. But it was their only chance. Behind them, the Doom engine loomed closer, its surface pulsing with energy, preparing to wipe Earth from existence. Reeves checked the ship's scanners. "No sign they've spotted us yet, but that won't last long." Cole nodded. They had to move fast, no second chances. As they neared the station, he could see signs of past battles, scorch marks, wreckage floating lifeless in space. The Xel'Zeren had abandoned it, assuming humanity would never rise again. They had been wrong. The dropship latched onto the docking bay. The airlock hissed open, and they moved in, weapons ready. The station was dark, its corridors silent, emergency lights flickering, casting long shadows. Everything reeked of rust and time. Reeves pulled up the schematics. "Power core is still operational, but we need to manually activate the rail cannon." Cole signaled to the others, "Move fast, set up defenses. We won't get a second shot." They split up, some securing the entrance, others rushing toward the control room. Reeves and Cole pushed forward, climbing through debris, reaching the cannons. Firing control screens flickered, showing warnings. "System offline, manual override required." Reeves cursed, punching in commands. "It's locked. We need to reset it from the external array." Cole didn't hesitate, grabbing his gear. "Let's go." They moved fast, reaching the outer maintenance hatch. As the station rotated, Earth came into view below, the Doom engine looming behind it, a god of destruction waiting to strike. Cole stepped onto the platform, feeling the void stretch endlessly around him. The only sound was his own breathing inside the suit. Reeves worked fast, reconnecting the targeting relays, nearly their hold on. Then the alarms blared. Enemy ships inbound, Xel'Zeren fighters screaming toward them. The distraction was over. They had been found. Gunfire erupted from inside the station as the others fought to hold the line. Reeves shouted over the comms, "Done, get back inside." Now Cole turned, firing as drones swarmed around them, his shots tearing through the machines. As they dodged and weaved, he grabbed Reeves, pulling her back through the hatch as explosions shook the station. Back in the control room, the rail cannon hummed to life, systems coming online, targeting parameters locked in. Cole shoved Voss into the seat. "Do something right for once, line up the shot." Voss hesitated, then nodded, his fingers flying over the controls. The cannon powered up energy building. The Xelzoran fighters broke through the hull, swarming inside reinforcements, flooding the corridors. Reeves tossed Cole a detonator. "We can't hold much longer." Cole pressed the trigger, setting off charges along the docking bay, cutting off the enemy for a few moments, just enough time. The cannon fired a single shot, a rail slug moving at near light speed, ripping through space. It struck the Doom engine at its core. Silence. Then a blinding eruption fire ripping through the machine, its structure collapsing, the god of destruction falling. As the station shook, Cole breathed heavy, watching the impossible happen. Humanity had won against all odds. They had survived.